Yeah. So a very good evening to everyone. Thanks so much for beaming in wherever you're at. Just before we kick off tonight at the Indigenous Ways Wisdom Circle, like every start, I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge our traditional caretakers, ancestors of these lands that we reside on in Santa Fe, New Mexico. That is the Pueblos. And also I want to take this time and opportunity to wherever you're beaming in from, just to acknowledge the traditional caretakers, ancestors of the lands that you are from, so we can be here this evening. Thank you.
Big yate to everyone. And just for everybody's knowledge, yate is really a cool word that I don't think many people understand. I think they think yate just means high, but actually yate as ya means sky, universe. Ate means it is. So the way I interpret that means we are all the universe. Isn't that cool? How's that for quantum physics scientists of the Western world? Hey. Anyways, we definitely love to just emphasize the reason for this nonprofit to begin with is me and Elena came together about 14 years ago, and we realized that each one of us represents me, the Northern Hemisphere, and Elena, the Southern Hemisphere. So we thought, coming from matrilineal cultures, we would just connect the hemisphere, the both hemispheres, with both of our matrilineal lineages and set up this Indigenous Ways nonprofit to bridge cultures globally. And we are so honored to be doing that today, thanks to this platform and many other endeavors we have stepped into. So our nonprofit is Indigenous Ways, and our goal is always to drop the walls of separation, because there's too much beauty, especially here in these lands, from all the indigenous tribes. We need to all be learning from each other and walking in each other's pathways so that we can learn from each other. And it's just such a wealth of unbelievable knowledge. So tonight we're really, really, really excited to have our guest of honor, and we'll get to that in just a moment. In the meantime, every Wednesday night we have our virtual wisdom keeper circle, and we pick somebody that we like, what they've got, what they're doing, their walk, and we feel like people can benefit from their knowledge and their words, their prayers. So we asked them if they would be willing to join us, and that's on Wednesday nights from 6 to 7 Mountain Daylight Time. And then on Friday nights, we like to have a nice party night, meaning we bring in we bring in Indigenous and LGBTQIA2+ presenters who, again, we like what they're doing with their art, their medium, their creations, their creator gifts, so that they're born with, and they're doing something with it for the world to also learn different stories and different ways of being and hear different languages. So that's on Friday nights, 6 Mountain Daylight Time as well. And we're very, very excited tonight to have our special guest of honor, and I will give Elena the wonderful honor.
So before I announce our amazing guest of honor, which we're just so excited to have, the only way that we got the opportunity to meet was through a course that we do together, and we're part of the ELP. Now, I had a brain slip, and I can't remember what E is, but I'm going to call it the Extraordinary Leadership, the second round. And I also want to acknowledge our facilitator, who's also on the line in our Zoom, Vicky Posibond, who's here. And also we've got Anne-Marie McLaughlin, who's from the Santa Fe Community Foundation, and both of them do extraordinary things in the community. So that's how Joannie and I got to meet with these other extraordinary people in the nonprofit sector doing extraordinary things in the community. Now, this woman is just an extraordinary mover and shaker. Not only is she a mother of 4 young children aged between 8 and 11, she is a policymaker in Indian world. And not only that, you know, I honestly think she doesn't sleep, but she's also currently doing her PhD dissertation at this moment. But one of the reasons, like Tash was saying, and bringing these people in this time that we are in at the moment, is how do we get through this together? And it's bringing in extraordinary people like Joanie, who are not only moving and shaking up policy world, not only as a very empowered Native American woman, not only in her tribe, in her family, and doing so many extraordinary things. That's how we do it, and being inspired by others to really do whatever we were created to do in this time. So, in saying that, I want you to buckle up, have open hearts and minds, and with that, please let's give it up for the one and only Joannie Suina Romero.
I love it. Thanks so much for the wonderful introduction, and good evening, good day, depending on where you're tuning in from. I want to welcome you all to joining this learning circle, and really the honor is mine to be chosen to be a part of this collective. So thank you, Netra. I'm very honored to share with you some of my reflections that I've had over the past several months. But first, I must start out with who I am. So, kuetsi hopa kuchinaksi janhato it's ese shutanahano suta kukit asi osuta. I am a daughter of the Pueblo of Cochiti. Again, my name is Joannie Romero. Fox Clan, my Cochiti name that was given to me on my 4th day of life is Corn Pollen. And I am also of mixed heritage. My ancestors are not only indigenous to the Pueblo of Cochiti, but I also have Irish and French ties as well. I'm the owner of a small business called Corn Pollen Consulting, and we specialize in culturally responsive strategy. And really what we do is we seek to support and empower Indigenous people. And then lastly, other than being a wife and a mother and a daughter, and I'm also a doctoral student pursuing a degree at the University of Washington, and I'm focusing on educational leadership. So again, thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. So I'm going to be transitioning between my presentation, and I will be sharing my screen and I'll be turning it off. I really want to be inclusive to all of our learning styles. And so right now I'm going to share my screen and then I will turn it off shortly. But tonight I envisioned that we would go on a journey together. I want us to reflect on the many challenges that our world has witnessed as these two pandemics have unfolded, COVID and also the quest for racial justice. So during our journey, here are some suggestions for you. And I just want to say, please feel free to take notes, to doodle, to draw, and to do whatever allows you to dive deep with me. Please be warned that some of my story may trigger some feelings, including your own ancestral memory. And then lastly, please know again that I will be shifting between sharing my screen and then also I want to pose questions to you all. So thank you. And now let us embark on our journey together. Okay, let me go back to my... Sorry about that. I'll get the hang of it by the time we keep moving. So when we think about truth-seeking narratives such as justice and being inclusive, I believe that we must unearth our soil. So I pose the question to you. When you think about your own personal journey, what might be exposed within your soil? For me personally, my unearthing includes that I must tap back into my matrilineal lineage. As Pueblo people, we carry strong maternal clan lines, and mine is abundant with stories of resilience, of strength, of pain, of trauma, of prayers, of hopes and dreams. I carry my clan along with a long line of matriarchs that came before me. And so the photo that you see in front of you is 5 generations of Pueblo women. The bottom right photo is my great-great-grandmother. The middle bottom photo is my grandmother. The bottom left photo is my mother. And then the top photo is me along with my 3 daughters. So the next question that I want to pose to you as I share my journey is, what seeds are rooted in your lineage, and how are those tied to your own stories of resilience? So something to think about as we keep moving along. And you saw a snapshot of the next slide, but as I flip to this next slide, I want to share some of these pieces about my homeland, which I feel are really critical to the carrying of knowledge, to the bearing of culture, and to the continuance of our ways of life, and how policies have affected communities like mine. Because I feel like in today's world that we are in, just going back to what Elena was saying, everything is tied to how policy has affected our communities. So like I shared, I come from the Pueblo of Cochiti, which is home to the 11th largest man-made dam in the world. It used to be the 7th, that has since changed, but I would like to also say that we joke and call it the dam because of all of the problems it's caused from us, for us. And not only does it encompass 11,000 of our 50,000 acres of reservation land, but it almost completely took away from us our subsistent ways of life. And in the 1970s, when the dam was completed, the Office of Head Start had simultaneously come into the community and really pushed policy into our communities, into Pueblo country as a whole, that English only be spoken, and that the agenda for literacy was also high. So as you can imagine, that shifted our community in many ways. Some other effects of the building of the dam were that for about a generation and a half, a decade and a half, we saw standing pools of water that almost led to an end of our subsistence and our agricultural ways of life. For many of you that are familiar with our Pueblo communities, we follow a traditional calendar that really ties back into how corn is life to us. And so in that, through our ceremonies, everything that we do revolves around this being our way of life, our prayers during our planting, our harvest, what we dance for, what we pray for, what we pray with. And so again, that really affected my community in many ways. And so some of the after effects of that were that our children were no longer speaking our language. And I mention this because through our language, we carry our culture within it. And for me personally, I carry my culture with me wherever I go, and it will always be a lifelong pursuit to teach my children and to teach my grandchildren and their children our ways. So it's very important to understand these political deterrents that have pulled us away from our traditional life ways. So as we move along and we talk about policies that have affected our communities, I want you to think about your community specifically and what policies exist or have been enacted, what pieces of legislation that have affected your community in a way that maybe are beyond repair, maybe that we maybe are still recovering from. And when I think about the building of the dam, there were a couple policies, pieces of legislation that were not in place yet. The Native American Graves and Repatriation Act were not they didn't come along until the 1990s. And then later on after that, American Indian Religious Freedom Act. And so there were so many things that were happening that the Army Corps of Engineers came to our community and specifically wanted to build the dam here. And so again, this huge life shift that it created for us in terms of how we carried on with culture and language. And you take, for example, about 15 miles down the road, you have a neighboring Pueblo community, also speaking Keres as well, not being affected the way we were and still maintaining and upholding traditional ways of life in a way that's very different because the effects of policy weren't there in the way that they were in Cochiti. So this next part of our journey is going to dive a little bit more into some more personal, vulnerable places for me. And I just want to give everyone a trigger warning for those of you that have just joined. I will be discussing some things that are very personal and heavy on my heart. And I think I just also want to mention that I come into this place already feeling vulnerable, but wanting to share with you all the impact of where I'm at, where COVID has taken us. And that being said, you know, yesterday would have been our annual feast day in Cochiti, and it broke my heart on so many levels that we were not able to be in ceremony. And I, like many of my brothers and sisters, find ceremony to be very healing. It's a great way for us to connect with our relatives. It's a great way for us to connect earth world to spirit world. And so not being able to partake in that in our normal fashion was detrimental, but nonetheless, it was great to come around a table with some close relatives and enjoy our traditional foods. And additionally, this weekend, I lost my uncle, my dad's oldest brother, to COVID. And so as I began to think about how relentless this virus, this sickness is to our communities, you know, I just hold everyone close in my prayers and in my thoughts. Okay, I'm going to go back to share screen. So this is a photo of myself and some of my cousins from about 1992. And on this day in 1992, July 14th, we were also preparing for our feast day. Like I shared, every July 14th, our community has a celebration that is a beautiful blend of our survivance as Pueblo people and the way we've merged our Catholic feast days with our traditional calendar. And the purpose of these include praying for continued sustenance, for rain, for prosperity, for good health, and for plentiful harvests. And embedded in these teachings also include core values through which we are rooted to. Teachings of family, of culture, of language, of love, of support, and of forgiveness. And so the boy on the right-hand side in the photo is my cousin, more like a brother. And I'm going to switch back, but jumping to 2017, and just to let you know, we're speeding up to 2017. We jumped from 1992 to 2017. I want you to think about where you were 3 years ago and how much our lives have shifted, not only due to COVID, but to the unearthing of soil and unrest of unjust policies that have continued to emerge right before our eyes. So my brother, my cousin in the photo that I shared with you, I did not only lose him in 2017, but there were so many things that were really pivotal to my experience that would continue to shape my leadership, that would shape my want to continue to give back and feel like, am I giving back enough? I want to make a difference. But in 2017, I was also completing my graduate studies through the University of Tulsa. I earned a Master of Jurisprudence in Indian law, and a couple weeks before my graduation, I received more bad news that we had lost another family member. As you know, Indigenous families are super tight, and we don't differentiate between cousin and great aunt and great uncle, etc. Rather, we see everyone as a relative, and in most cases as sister and brother. And so losing my nephew completely tore our world apart. Like I shared, I'm a mom of 4. I have an 11-year-old, a set of twins that are 9 and 9, and an 8-year-old. And at the time, it just really shook our family. We're still trying to heal from it. But I think the piece that really lit a fire under me was that it made me so angry with the justice system. Because not only was there a whole slew of discriminatory assumptions that were made in regard to this car accident that took my nephew's life, but I felt like the lack of response into the investigation only continued to prolong everything. And so for those of you that are in New Mexico, you may have recalled seeing this play out on the local news channels, and having to explain to my children that their cousin, their brother, was no longer with us and that we would not see him until we journey on to meet him was one of the most painful things I've ever had to experience. When I came back to realizing how much work I had put in for this degree that I shared with you, I had also earned in 2017, I just felt like I wasn't giving back enough. I felt unfulfilled, and I felt like there was something more that I needed to do. I also still felt very unsettled because of the ripple effects of trauma that, we had just experienced. And I couldn't compare it to how much more of a difference I wanted to make in the world through my work, through my research. So my next question for you to think about is, how do you quench that thirst for learning? And does the need to help community ever go away? Many of us are very tied to community-based work. And for me personally, I feel like, that's where my heart has always been. I'm very passionate about being involved. From a very young age, I've been in a number of different positions and really had the opportunity to learn along great leaders and have learned many of their leadership styles as well. So moving along, now that you've heard my pain story and it hurts, and I'm in a position where I've shared all these things that position me kind of in a vulnerable place, I want to share with you also that it's taken, this many years still, and it feels like it's been a long time when I think back 3 years ago where we've been, that, these kinds of traumas don't heal quickly. And in fact, they don't heal sometimes even between generations. So I want to ask you also, think about what awakens your ancestral memory. What kinds of traumas are there, and how do we heal our generations that are beside us, that are behind us, and that are in front of us? So as you think about that, I'm switching back to my screen. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the story and into the journey. And we're going to explore Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So we're jumping to the other side of the United States. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Carlisle Indian Industrial School, It was opened in 1879 and was the master plan behind governmental policy to assimilate Indian children. It was devised by an Army colonel named Richard Henry Pratt. This is a very famously used photo, which is taken on the grounds of Carlisle. So from 1879 to 1918, Carlisle saw tens of thousands of children all across the United States through its doors. And in fact, my children, through their father, are the descendants of a student named Cyrus Dixon, who is from Cochiti, who attended Carlisle. So in reflecting on my own research, my own healing, that ancestral trauma is in our bloodline. When we lost my nephew, all I could think about was this unresolved grief from 6 generations back. And I thought about the children that had gone to boarding school. Some of them went missing. Some of them died of illnesses, malnutrition, abuse in general was very common at these schools. And I thought about how, through lack of ceremony like we are experiencing right now during COVID, how does that shift our spiritual identity and our connection to this greater power that carries us and holds us? And so one of the students that Cyrus had gone to school with is that of a child named Pedro Sanchez, who is actually buried there in the cemetery at Carlisle. And in preparing for this trip, and mind you, this is all 2017, so January, I lost my cousin Isaac. April, we lost Anthony. May, I completed my degree. And then July, I made the journey to Carlisle. And I was really nervous about making the trip. And this, for me, meant the culmination of all my research. It's everything I had read up on. It was why I was interested in language revitalization. It's why I became an educator. And so having the opportunity to go to Carlisle was really meaningful for me on many levels. I actually was selected as a part of a Teachers Development Institute, and through it we would access the archives that were housed at Dickinson College. And so as a part of that, I had the opportunity to pull specifically what I was interested in researching. And of course, I was very much interested in looking at Pueblo students that had attended Carlisle. And so the photo that you see before you is a picture of Pueblo girls when they arrived. And then the next slide is 18 months later, how they had shifted identity completely. I mean, they just look like completely different children. But more specifically, on the day that we were visiting Carlisle, I adorned my Pueblo moccasins. I tied my hair in a traditional bun, and I wore, clothing that resembled my home. I had planned that I would go and pay my respects at the cemetery, and in talking to different townspeople in Carlisle, it was very apparent that they did not know that there was an Indian school that had existed. And so that morning, as I made my way to our meeting point where our van was going to take us, I was crossing a major intersection. And as I was walking through the crosswalk, I was taken aback by a truck that sped up. And so I'm going across the street, and this truck is coming from the opposite direction, going to make a turn into the road that I'm in. And this truck pulls up really close behind me, slows down. I keep my pace. I'm obviously walking with a lot of haste, but from the corner of my eye, I can see that this man is a white male. He has a bald, shaved head. He's sitting in this truck that's pretty lifted high, so I'm already kind of a little bit lower as a pedestrian. and he has music that's blaring extremely loud. And then he points his hand out of the window. And as he pointed at me, I looked back at him to see, what was happening, because I was really scared at that point. And he was like this to me, as I was making my way through the crosswalk, as though he had a loaded gun. And he proceeded to yell at me, and he told me, "Get out of the road, whatever the fuck you are." And in that moment, I thought about, freezing and just not moving. I thought about so many different things, but the thing that happened to me in that moment, I will say, is that my ancestral memory kicked in, and I felt the pain of the children that went to Carlisle. I felt the memory of the experiences that they had when they'd get off the train and march the quarter of a mile to the dormitories, and the looks and the racial slurs that were thrown at them by the townspeople. I thought about all the abuse that they experienced, the new names that they were given, the lye and the kerosene baths that were supposed to rid them of all things Indian. No more room for Indian here. Always, never being good enough ever again. What does that do to our generations? So now, as we move along in this journey, take a deep breath. If you have to, do some stretches, take a drink of water. Now we're going to journey to where we are at now in 2020. So here we are, 2020, COVID was definitely not the year that we all expected it to be. I know at the beginning of the year, I saw a lot of my friends share about all these amazing resolutions that they had, plans for trips, weddings that they were going to be in, and COVID kicked all of that down into the dirt, back into the soil. And here I am in this space of philanthropy, a space that was created from stolen land and off the backs of Black slaves. And yes, I said it, I did. But how is it in this day and age that we still have policies that exist like that at the time of Carlisle, in which we have children in cages? Why is it that the policing of bodies of color and the raping of this land is so resemblant in the way that our Indigenous women are treated and go missing, and women in general? I'm a true believer that what we do to the land, we do to our women. And I think that's been very apparent in the climate justice and quest for that we've been on. And for folks that haven't studied Indian law and policy, I think, the other piece is that they are not familiar with the fact that the United States has attempted on many occasions to terminate and assimilate our people. And that we are the only racial group that is defined by blood quantum and pedigree. And when I teach about this in my Indian law classes at the Institute of American Indian Arts in the past 2.5 years that I've taught, one of the jaw droppers for my students is that when we share that dogs and horses are the only other living beings that are categorized by pedigree, their jaw hits the floor, because we're not taught this in school. And when we think about how philanthropy has shaped our communities for folks to act out of charity instead of solidarity, toward what steps are we making towards justice? And I think that also as we see these two pandemics unfold, COVID and stepping towards racial equity and calling out these systems of institutional racism and white supremacy, that people are seeing our communities with a magnifying glass on them, shining upon the issues that we knew were there, that they've always been there, but now the world sees them in a different way. We know our communities lack the infrastructure, and there's policies that are set up that way so that we don't get beyond where we need to be healthy, vital communities. Our unpaved roads, lack of running water, overt racism, lack of food security and food deserts for that matter. Not to mention the neoliberalism and the privatization of having access to adequate healthcare. And yesterday, as I was running some errands here in town in Santa Fe, I was headed west on St. Francis Drive, one of the major roads here in town. And this vehicle cut me off, and I didn't pay any attention to it because I was so excited that we had just filed our taxes, that we made the deadline, that, you know, I was in my own little world, listening to my music, thinking about today's presentation and what I would share, what I would recap. And the next thing I know, this vehicle is slowing down. They're on the driver's side of me, and they're honking their horn, they're throwing F-bombs and showing me the middle finger and a whole bunch of other things. And I just thought, gosh, you know, I didn't even do anything. Much like in Carlisle, I didn't do anything. We don't ask for this to happen. But this overt racism is coming out in so many different ways that I can't even explain how, you know, to my children, that they may have to face these things someday themselves. You know, how painful is that as a parent right now in this world that we're living in, that we have to prepare our children for having to deal with some of these situations. And so the next piece that I want us to explore, and I don't have a whole lot of other slides to share, but rather I want us to think about, you know, these policies that we see that shape the ability of our communities to have access or to not have access to resources, but to think about how they not only continue to design lacking inclusivity of all of our BIPOC folks when they come to the table, but they just continue to diagnose us as a version of American when we don't fit into that cookie cutter version of being American. And so that, to me, that's really frustrating because I can't define myself as that. And when I think about the unjust and brutal murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and the countless others who have lost their lives to this so-called disobedience, civil disobedience, like, what are we doing? And I think that, you know, these post-colonial remnants are tasks that we, this generation, we must address. We have to call it out. We have to call out the aversive racism that exists within these systems. Philanthropy is a big space for that. And in doing so, you know, I've learned that during this time of COVID, lots of folks are uncomfortable with learning that, you know, they are anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, anti-LGBTQ+, Two-Spirit, and our other relatives that I may have left out. And I think that, you know, that level of discomfort that arises it's necessary. So we must continue to drive folks towards remembering our own sense of compassion to the human race. And I just like, I wonder, why is it that in so many of these spaces that there's this persistent framing around, again, giving that is focused on acting out of charity, but why can't we shift that narrative? Why can't we shift that narrative and make it an act to give out of solidarity for humanity, for humanity's sake? And so, as you can hear in my voice, 2020 has allowed me to get angry in a new way and to heal some of my ancestral trauma, because no longer are these issues existing under the surface of consciousness. But now they're on a platform for everyone to see. We can't just talk about diversity in the spaces, and I'm talking back towards philanthropy and academia. Those are the spaces that I'm most familiar with, and they're very much alike. We really have to make systemic change. We have to reroot ourselves in our communal core values and do some deep listening. We must think about what is a value and what values are important to us. We must create spaces where we are okay with expressing our emotions. And I was reminded a couple weeks ago during one of my doctoral classes when my professor, Dr. Michelle Montgomery, reminded us that when we come together, it's okay to cry. It's okay to express our emotions, to shed tears. We bring hundreds of thousands of years of ancestral experience and memory and resilience with us. And they are celebrating those moments with us as well. So the ways in which we navigate these spaces comes with a strategy of integrating our own methodologies. And sometimes we may be switching from a settler decolonial lens to explain things, but I ask that when we think about the word decolonize and how we move forward past COVID, life after COVID, that we also understand that we must be flexible in our adaptability to carry on with our traditional ways of life. We can't necessarily go back to how things were pre-contact. We all know that, we see that, or pre-COVID for that matter. But I know that as somebody who is committed to cultivating community, that there's a lot of pressure to not only become fluent in our languages and multiple languages for that matter, but also to learn everything that happens during our traditional calendars when we're trying to balance our schedules, go to school, raise our families. But I think that we need to be comfortable with knowing that our resilience is rooted in moving forward by retaining and revitalizing what we can and what we will carry on to promote healthy qualities of life. So as I leave you with a few words about my overall reflection, to sum it up, these past few months and the outward looking forward, I just ask that we no longer allow the dominant narratives to tell the story for us. Our children have experienced massive amounts of trauma during this time of COVID. And we must remember that our stories are living. They are living research, they are living knowledge. And we must continue to practice integrating our languages into everything that we do moving forward. We must continue to practice integrating our core values into everything that we do moving forward. And we can't go back to being the machines that our places of employment expect us to be, including giving 110% output at all times. Now is the time that we must reconnect with the land, with the soil, the seeds, and to remember that we define bringing agency to our bodies and how we think about health and well-being. And so we must not only nurture our bodies, but we must also nurture our spirits. So I ask you to please join me in continuing to reflect. I found this to be very healing for me. I've been doing a lot of journaling, and it helps to cope with the difficulties and the challenges that our globe is in right now. So let this be a conversation that exists with yourself and with your spirit in perpetuity. Let us liberate the souls of our ancestors by reclaiming what happens inside these systems and how we move forward and how we pollinate together. Our theory of action is that we be congruent with our cultural reality. And this means that we continue to scaffold, we build, we dream some more, we vision, we build upon what we have, and we carry the medicine. So as we come to a close on our journey, think about your questions. What are your questions for humanity? What have we normalized? And how can you call on ancestral medicine and knowledge as we work through healing together? Thank you.
Isabel, thank you very much. This is a wonderful evening that we have just shared with our beautiful sister, and we are so grateful to hear our community members out there that are remembering and putting the remembering into the action. And when I say putting the remembering into the action, is what did our elders teach us? Our elders, as we're going into elderhood ourselves, have always taught us to remember where you came from. Remember your people. Remember your land, because when all else is said and done and the world out there fails you, where are you going to go home to? Who's going to embrace you and hold you in your heartache, in your sadness, in your loss, in your despair? And who's going to celebrate your PhD when you get it, your master's degree when you get it, your bachelor's degree when you get it, your associate's degree when you get it, your certificate of completion of something special that is interesting to you, that again is going to do the reciprocity pool of going back to the people, giving back to the people, and always, always keeping the people right here in the heart. Ancestors in the heart. We are the DNA of our ancestors. We are the blood of our ancestors. They are still alive in us today. Thank you very much. We love you. We love your walk, and we love everything about you. And guess what? I'm a 3-time alumni. IAIA alumni-ite. So
love it.
I'm so glad you're at IA. Oh yeah, I went, shoot, I'm going to get all my degrees from IA. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Joanie. Before we go into the next portion, I just wanted to take this time and thank you for sharing your vulnerability and your honesty, particularly on this format. But in doing that, it's also about the bigger picture of what you shared in order for us to get through this together in an extraordinary time where we are. It is really looking at our past, looking at our historical trauma. So I really want to thank you and holding that for all of us, because whether we like it or not, we're in this time of reflectiveness, as you talked about, because we can't go anywhere, you know. And so whether we know it or not, we're all assimilated in systems. And those systems, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, are breaking down. And what we're looking at is truth, you know, and our truth. So I really appreciate you bringing all of this together, and particularly looking at your story of the connection, not only of your ancestors, but the ancestors that were in the boarding schools, and the trauma that was experienced that keeps getting passed down from generation to generation. And I really got what you talked about. So I really, really appreciate that. Tasha's going to say something, then we're going to go into what's going on, and then our Zoomsters will bring you in very soon.
And I really would like to just insist that we take it into us that we are allies of each other as cultural people, and we are not competitors. We should not be in competition with each other's Navajo-ness or Pueblo-ness or Apache-ness, or which band is better than the other, and who's more traditional and who's doing the ceremonies more right. You know, we're all just doing the best we can. So we really want to bring somebody on that can talk to that, because that is another big thing that is systemic learning, that we don't need to be competitive. We need to support and be allies. And that's what the Institute of American Indian Arts is all about, and Dene College in Saley, Arizona. So, yeah, what a powerful message tonight.
So if
Thank
you've just tuned in, you've just heard powerful medicine and words and her own processing from the beautiful Joannie Suina Romero. You can also find her at her website, which is cornpollenconsulting.org. What we're going to do now is just let you know what's been going on, or what is going on. And so this Friday, you know, we talk about supporting artists, supporting presenters. One of the important medicines that we believe in is laughter. I mean, that's how we've all survived through the traumas of whatever that is through laughter. And so we've got a beautiful brother, Crazy Cassie Nichols, high up in Indian world and native world for comedy. He's going to be joining us this Friday. And then I'm really stoked as well, because at the Wisdom Circle this time next week, we've got Colin Denny. Each month we will have a deaf presenter. Colin Denny is from the Navajo Nation. I've been to two, what do they call them? Graduations. And my very first one was from this amazing gentleman at Dene College on the Navajo Nation in Titsaley. He was one of the speakers, and he was the keynote speaker and just blew my socks apart. So he's going to be our presenter next week. So we'd love you to be joining us on all of these platforms, same channel, same time. Now, this is possible not only because of your individual donations and making these platforms so we can keep doing this, supporting the ASL interpreters and also our presenters like Joanie, but we've also been sponsored by, in the Wisdom Circle, the New Mexico Humanities Council, as well as the National Endowment of Humanities. Also, we have the Santa Fe Arts and Culture Department, as well as the National Endowment of the Arts, the First Peoples Fund, and New Mexico Arts. We also want to give a shout out to our IndigenousWays board, who have been on board, but as I said before, it's also the wonderful gifts from you and making that possible.
And yesterday we went on a journey up to Black Mountain, and we put our focus into meeting a beautiful Chinle health worker by the name of Lynn Dean, and she's gorgeous. She lives right next to her parents up there on the mountain, and she makes sure that the elders get their medications, make sure they have water, and whatever the needs are. So we met her at the chapter house with 30 boxes of cleaning supplies, and she happened to say, you know, the elders also need straw hats because they're out in the baking sun, and without mostly electricity and certainly no running water and no air conditioning, it gets pretty hot up there in the summertime. So one of our beautiful board members donated 50 hats, straw hats, 25 male and 25 female. And some other donors donated umbrellas, which are great for sun as well. And we also got another donor that donated 20 reading glasses. Was another thing she asked for, was reading glasses. She asked for puzzles. We were able to get 7 puzzles. So we're going to continue. Oh, we got 2 donated hand washing stations as well. And we took 2 big water drums. So we made 2 families very happy with that. And we delivered water as well. So we're going to be going back in a few weeks, and I'll let Elena take over.
So a lot
of
you are aware this was our 3rd run to the Navajo Nation to Black Mountain, and we could have only done that because of your love and support in doing that. So it was our 3rd run. We started this on the 15th of May, making our first run on the 23rd of May. Since May the 15th to today, thanks to all of you, we've been able to contribute $18,000 up to the Black Mountain. So there's 3 communities, 50 families, and feeding them. Yesterday's run was just focused on the elders that we did in a turnaround in 2 weeks. So we had a lot of gifts that people had posted that came to the door from the postie, from East Coast, West Coast. A lot of you donated online. A lot of you just came over and dropped stuff of our doorway. In this time, it's just been so tremendous, particularly of where we're at, but the generosity of heart. And that's something that also Joannie touched on as well. But we just wanted to take this time and thank each and every one of you for making it absolutely possible. If you do want to donate, we will be focusing, our next one is on the hand washing basins up there and taking that up there. The connection there is Tasha's grandmother was from there. Her mother was born there, all of them. So it's a family, a beautiful family affair in doing this. So if you are able to donate, here's the online thing. We've got a snail mail and so forth in doing that.
My mom's here and my stepdad. Hi, Mom and Harry. My sister's here. Hi, Missy. My niece, Najoni. Hi, Najoni.
One of the cool things that making the 17-hour round trip really doable and worthwhile. And thank you so much, Kathy and Harry. We went to their place on Oak Ridge. And we walked into fry bread and mutton stew.
Woo! That made the trip, Mom. That was the best mutton stew ever. After
that was love.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is that great time. Everyone in Zoom, if you want to flick on your cameras and really, it's given you an opportunity to really integrate these powerful words that this extraordinary, Christine, this extraordinary woman has shared with us, Joannie. So this is the time for a sharing or just a really connection with what's happening, or just a time just to check in with what's going on. People are zooming in and turning on their cameras. I just want to say, Deborah Roger from our Facebook, one of the Facebook pages, has said, "Thank you, Joannie, for gifting us with your story and asking very powerful questions and presenting a most thoughtful learning. Much respect and love from the backwoods of so-called Vermont." And then I also want to thank Kathy Ponce is on the social media as well. And she says, Joannie, that was fantastic. I'm going to come back and click into also some more social media. I'm also going to go down into our Zoom, and if you turn on your video, it's just really an option whether or not you want. Just remember, all of this is getting recorded. We're grateful to each and every one of you. Is there anyone that wants to kick it off with a comment, a question for Joannie, or just a reflective of what you have just soaked in from her powerful medicine words?
Let's hear from Judy Shapiro in Washington, D.C., Indian policy lawyer.
Kia ora, Judy.
Hi, guys. So I have to say that this is touching a lot of parts of my memory and my experience, because 30 years ago and more, Joannie, I worked with your elders on behalf of the Pueblo.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I was involved in the long-term effort to undo the flooding of the fields.
Wow.
And I remember very vividly, I was a very young lawyer then, younger anyway. And the orders that we had from the Pueblo government was, get it fixed, but make sure that we don't have to touch any of the doing of it. It was a requirement, as it came out, for the Corps of Engineers to put in a system for draining the fields and to maintain the system for draining the fields. And no funds were ever to come through the Pueblo for that, because that would have been just an awful thing. That the fact that the fields were were underwater was, as you said, was a total devastation to tradition, but no one wanted to ever touch money for that.
Mm.
And then not very long after that, and almost exactly 30 years ago, I stayed involved because someone wanted to put hydropower on that dam.
Right.
And I don't know if you know about this one because you were young then. And our instructions were to stop that as best we could for reasons that no one could tell us and which I cannot divulge. And we were faced with filing a brief before a federal agency saying, don't do it, and we can't tell you why. And we knew that wasn't going to work. And the way it ultimately worked out, and I'm sorry, I'm going to the dark now. The way that it ultimately worked out was a very quick piece of legislation that says, I think exactly, notwithstanding the provisions of any other law, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission shall not license hydropower at Cochiti Dam. And that went through in those days with powerful people deciding to do the right thing because it was the right thing.
Mm.
I'm not sure that that could happen in Washington now. And I was very pleased to be part of it then.
Wow.
Judy, will you tell us what you're doing right now? Your latest case you're working on? Go ahead, feel free to tell us.
Yeah, I'm part of the team representing the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe in facing down the state of South Dakota and the White House, which is demanding that the tribe take down its checkpoints that are preventing people coming onto the reservation. And they've been ordered by the governor, and they've been ordered by the White House, and they've been ordered by the Interior Department to take down the checkpoints. And the tribe is saying, nope, we're going to do it because we're going to protect our people.
Right.
And so we have filed suit against Donald Trump and the Interior Department and other lovely people. That's some of what I'm working on now.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. That's amazing. And for sharing that story that touches my heart in so many ways.
I probably worked with your relatives.
I would bet on that. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Judy.
you, Judy.
Judy, what we'll do is hook you both up. You know, you
I
need
would like
be
to do
hooked up.
that.
Yes.
So
that would
we'll
be great.
connect
Thank
you in the emails, and please do stay connected. As you've heard from Judy, she's been doing extraordinary thing in Indian policy, in Indian world, moving and shaking so many things, as like you have, Joanie. So that's how we do it. Thanks, Judy, for tuning in. Lovely to see you on your evening walk. Is there anyone else that wants to tune in, share something with Joanie, just check in, any of that wonderful good stuff?
I love seeing the familiar faces. Gets me excited.
Right, now you got your hand up, mate. Yep.
Yes. You asked a question about what policies have been in place that are still affecting people. And I think housing policies and mandated segregation, I think people are still feeling the ramifications of the housing policies from the past, and people were segregated, and I think generations have gone through that and they've suffered of having to live in vulnerable communities, and were mostly segregated to only buy in those areas.
Right. Thanks, Nell, for sharing that. Great insights.
Thanks, Nell.
Christina from New York City. What's up? How's New York City? Right now, New York City's in phase 3 right now. Everything's okay. We're still wearing our masks. How's everybody? How are you? I want you all to stay safe as well. Please wear your masks. Practice. Go ahead, Gabby.
Practice social distancing. Right, can I practice social distancing?
Gabby, we can't hear you. Practice social distancing as well, all of you, please. That's my message from New York City.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. My room was limited. Love you guys.
Love you. Thank you.
Okay, while some people are thinking about that, I'm just going to go to our chat box, Joni. We've got Andy Everett that has said, Joni, just wanted to say, I am such a fan. You inspire me to start my own business.
I love it.
And we've got Amber, Amber. Is Amber still on? I'll just read what Amber said. She said, thank you. Important connections, ceremonies, having to be held in different ways, passed on in the heart and kept as alive as possible. New and renewed connections to the earth.
Beautiful.
Is there anyone else that wants to check in, chime in, or share anything? If not, we'll sign out.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say hello to Joni. I wanted to thank her for her words tonight. I like to think that, we are always learning and we cannot stop the quest for more, understanding amongst each other. I had met Joni a year ago at a conference, and like you all, I was very inspired by her work. And especially because, just woman to woman, it's really hard to be real with one another, I think. And, I was very, very inspired by her. So, thank you all for holding this. I'm in the middle of cooking dinner, so sorry if I look crazy in the back, but no, I just wanted to say thank you. And, things like this throughout time and throughout this time at home, we came up with a saying like phones and tablets and computers used to keep us all apart before COVID, and now we're really depending on it to keep us together. So don't feel bad, don't feel shamed out, because I work at home, and I have 2 small boys that I look after at home all day too. So sometimes I feel a little bad, but then I get wonderful things like this, that are offered to us. And I just want to say thank you, and thank you to the organizers as well.
Thank you, sisters.
Thank
Great
you very
to see
much.
you.
Love your name. Jerry Barney, would you like to say anything? Oh,
yes, I do.
Oh, wait, but hold on. Christine just said something.
Oh, go ahead.
Christine, again, can you say it again? Christine? Oh, Gabby, I can't hear you. So. Hold on, Gabby. We can't hear you.
Underwater. Hey.
Christina's saying.
I'll go.
Christina's
I'll
saying.
go.
Okay,
I just want to say thank you so much for the wonderful interpreters. Thank you. The deaf community is really lucky to have ASL interpreters, and you, Tosh, and Elena also. We're very lucky to have you.
It's because we love you.
Thank you. Cherry baby.
Thank you, Cynthia. Jerry Barney.
Oh,
Yes.
Yate Joni. Yeah, thank you for your knowledge and your words, and IAIA alum.
Woo! Yeah.
Well, I was looking, you were showing that photo of 1992. That's when I graduated from IAIA. Yeah, your talk, the questions that you had asked. And as I, make my journey back home to Navajo land, to New Mexico, I really miss it. This COVID, it's like a mirror, it's showing me, it's just shining in my face. Jerry, what are your values? What means a lot to you? What are you doing? It's asking me, what am I doing? And I have thought about it since this had been going on. And with the most friendly, caring nudging of friends, they're saying, Jerry, come back, and that's what speaks to me. I've lost some family to it back in New Mexico, and You had asked what's the norm, or what has become the norm. For me, the norm is sitting at the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard in administrative and finance, and intellectually competition going on, and this hierarchical competition, and they're just micro aggressions that just come through with just one little verbiage, and you can just feel the coating of prestige, and I am tired of it. That's not going to get me anywhere, and it's not going to get anybody anywhere, and I am done, and I'm going to make my journey home. And the other question that you had asked was, what did do you feel that you need to give back? Yes, I do. I really do, and I want to help pull out the emotions in color on canvases. I want to bring out the voice, that suppressed voice, and take that away and bring out that courage in verbs, in language, in song. And that's one of the dreams that I have. And thank you. I really needed this. This is very helpful, a guidance and direction for us all. Yeah.
Just Netra, thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, Jerry, and
Thanks,
there's
Jerry, thank you.
Vicky Pazabon. Would you like to share some words?
Oh, well, I wrote from my heart in the chat box, and I'm really moved, and I came to listen and to learn. I've known Joni for a few years, and I've never heard some of your personal story in this way. So I'm really grateful to be here, and huge shout out to you, Elena and Tosh, for what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in, mate. Okay, is there anyone else in our Zoom that wants to say anything? Just before that, I just want to give also a shout out. Oh yeah, I'll come swing back round, Jerry. I just want to give a shout out. We've got Matthew James, who's on our social media. He's this beautiful young man living in Pinon on the Navajo Nation. I just wanted to give you a shout out. And also, I just wanted to say hi to my auntie from Aotearoa, New Zealand, that's tuned in, Christine Bullock, through our social media pages. So thank you for doing that. Homer Hubble as well, tuned in and stayed. Phenomenal brother, Dene, mover and shaker in this world. So, in saying that, is there anyone else on our Zoom platform that wants to say anything before we sign off for this evening? Jerry, did you want to say something? I saw you swinging your hand.
I just wanted to say that my grandmother, Mavis Herrera, to Coachity long ago, and so I think she's coaching.
Oh, okay, yeah. She's a grandma-in-law.
Yeah. So I can't wait to go see her as well, and see all the relatives, and
we'll have to connect then.
Yeah.
And Jerry's grandfather was Senator Pinto.
Ah, wow.
Yes.
All the beautiful connections.
Love it.
So, in saying that, if you're watching the recording of this, thank you so much, and where that is. One of the great things is this is recorded. It's also, as you know, on all our social medias. We appreciate everyone tuning in. There was so much enrichment and medicine that Joanie shared with us tonight. Some people may want to swing back round and soak that in or share it with your friends. You can do that through our website, IndigenousWays.org. If you want to sign on to our newsletters, we send out 2 every week, which is just a recap of what has happened. I also want to give a shout out to Deb from Taos, who watches all our recordings. Thank you so much for the card that we received this morning. I also want to thank each and every one of you. And just before we sign out, I want you to think of the questions that were asked. Very, very deep questions of our own reflective time and our own healing. But I also want to say this. All of you are extraordinary people walking on this planet. All of you are extraordinary in your walk on this planet and the connections that you make. I want to say this. Joannie Romero has been doing so many things, and almost like the lone wolf, the lone stranger in many, many circles. And what's important, and Turquoise, has clicked off, what's important also in these circles is not only seeing each other and validating each other, because sometimes with the work that we do, we feel like that we are alone in this. But Joannie, I want you to say that you're not. Just through some of the messages from Facebook, through the chat box, through people seeing you and validating you and doing our own work. I just wanted to reiterate that, because there's been too many of us that sometimes through this walk, our journey, it looks a little bit too hard. And, some of us just need to check out. This is not the time to be checking out. This is the time where we really need to be united. We really need to speak from the heart, as Joannie did in her story, which is also part of her collective healing, which is a collective for all of us. That's why we have the Indigenous circles. If you're new to this, please go back into the archives. There's been many powerful medicines that's been shared. I think there's something like in the wisdom
30,
side,
right, 30.
15 or 16. Incredible wisdom. And I've got to tell you, Joannie, those women from the Pueblo are so freaking powerful. I mean, just powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even need to speak. You just hold the essence. So just to come in here, thank you. So
You're our third Pueblo woman we've had.
Before we sign up, this would not be possible without our interpreters making access available. So let's give it up for both Gabby and also Cynthia, who made that possible. Thank you for all those that tuned in to make this possible and the circle possible. But more importantly, please, let's give it up for the one and only Joannie Suina Romero.
Everybody have a good night. Have a nice good night with some good food, and let's be nice to each other, okay? Love you.
And we'll look forward to seeing you here on Friday, same channel, same place, same time.
Comedy.
For some
Comedy.
laughter, for some laughter medicine.
This guy's insane.
I love
You're
it.
gonna love him. He's from Montana. One of those big, tall Indian guys. Good looking, too. We'll see you back here Friday.
Okay, everyone be well, be safe. Keep washing your
Bye.
hands,
Thank you all
mask
so
it.
much.
Thank you, Cynthia and Gabby. Love you guys.
Thank you, Joannie. You're a bloody awesome, mate. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
Okay,
You
stay
all
safe.
are
Good
awesome.
to see you, Donna, mate.
Kia ora.
Those umbrellas came through. Those elders love the umbrellas. Thank you.
Man. Woo!
Christina, you be well and be safe.
You guys too, everybody. Keep safe.
Okay. See you, Rosemary. Ciao, everyone. Thanks, Joannie.